Hi, everybody. I hope you're well today. Today's segment 5, punctuation, is going to be what we're going to work on and discuss. I need you to know that the punctuation in the first folio is what I call acting punctuation, which means it's for breathing, phrasing, and staging. All modern editions have changed the punctuation to be grammatical, which is for reading. It's literary, and it doubles the amount of punctuation. I say that punctuation is like a musical notation for a musician. The punctuation helps make the text a musical score. For me, Shakespeare's musical scores are more jazz. So when you change them to grammatical, they become more like classical, for me, like a waltz. Whereas when it's the folio and it's freer and allows the artist to do freer things, it's more unique. My definition is punctuation is your blueprint for your musical score or your roadmap to your script, especially a comedy script. Punctuation gives your character its specific rhythm. It tells you when to stop, speed up, slow down, inflect up, inflect down, halt, or get really excited. Use it, don't abuse it. With the first folio, I'm going to use some graphs that we did before in earlier segments, and this is the end stop graph. I said it begins with a capital letter and it ends with period, exclamation mark, or question mark. And going up those steps is done by repetition and punctuation. The power of punctuation depends on who is doing the punctuating, male or female. See if you can understand who did this one. Dear John, I want a man who knows what love is all about, period. You are generous, kind, thoughtful, period. People who are not like you admit to being useless and inferior, period. You have ruined me for other men, period. I yearn for you. I have no feelings whatsoever when we're apart, period. I can't be forever happy, dash, dash. Will you let me be yours? Question mark, Gloria. So think about who punctuated that. Now listen to this one. Dear John, I want a man who knows what love is, period. All about you are generous, kind, thoughtful people, who are not like you, period. Admit to being useless and inferior, period. You have ruined me, period. For other men, I yearn, period. For you, I have no feelings whatsoever, period. When we are apart, I can be forever happy, period. Will you let me be, question mark, yours, Gloria. Again, who punctuated that one? And then you hear the exact same words, but there's totally different meaning. The last example is my favorite because it's so short. A woman without her man is nothing. First, a woman, without her, man is nothing, period. Second, a woman, without her man, is nothing. You can make your own decisions, but I think it's very clear when a man punctuates it and when a woman punctuates it. Most modern editions, I'd say 85 to 90% are edited by men, and it is only recently, I think 6 years ago when I directed Twelfth Night down in Virginia, was the first time the Arden had, for me, female editors, and there's actually 2 of them. It's completely different consciousness. I would want the artist to be able to see all points of view to make a final decision. We're going to start with Shakespeare's first folio punctuation. The most important piece of punctuation is the end stop, period, exclamation mark, question mark. It shows when there's the end of a thought, and it requires a huge gear shift change, or it requires a change in the verb. My first example is going to be from The Taming of the Shrew, because you already have seen it. Petruchio, when he does his speech, You lie in faith, for you are called plain Kate and bonny Kate, and sometimes Kate the Cursed. It goes for 10 lines, I believe. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And it ends with, myself am moved to woo thee for my wife. It's one complete thought. You should look at it as one beat. You should basically look at it as one verb, although there's many changes within every line, but the action is one action. However, in modern editions, depending upon which one you use, there can be 2 periods, 3 periods, which would tell the actor that they could either stop and shift gears or pause. Sometimes this works, sometimes it makes it more choppy and more confusing. My, again, suggestion for you in learning is to see all the points of view and then decide which one brings about clarity. Remember, we said clarity is all important. The second example I'd like to use is Catherine. Catherine says, moved, comma, in good time, comma, let him that moved you hither remove you hence, colon, I knew you at the first, you were unmovable, period. So we see it's all one sentence, one end stop, therefore one beat. You will play one action. I will next talk about comma, a springboard, quick breath, keep going. Lift the line, think fast. However, one word in a piece of punctuation we also learned in the earlier segments meant that you could use all of your breath on that one word and elongate that word. So one word and a piece of punctuation was equal to a whole note or the longest that you could make it. For Catherine, her moved would be very long because she's topping Petruchio. He had M-O-O apostrophe of E-D. So it was spelling for him. For her, it's a punctuation clue. Moved in good time. Let him that moved you hither remove you hence. Then there's a colon, which means a big gear shift change and a breath. And she finalizes it. I knew you at the first, you were immovable. Her repetitions make her very clever and very witty. And that's the end stop. A colon, which is a big piece of punctuation, dot, dot, means the next thought is a more articulate thought. It's a better thought. That's why you use your volume, your pitch, your inflection, your intonation to make this change, to make it this more articulate thought. It can incorporate a big breath. So do not be afraid to take a big breath. People sometimes say to me, when can I breathe? With first folio punctuation, you can always breathe on the punctuation. However, the colon in the Elizabethan times, I believe, also could mean a focus change. So Brutus, when he's talking to Cassius, I'm going to put Cassius over here, is talking about Julius Caesar. And he says, did not great Julius bleed? What shall one of us? So the focus change could have been where the colons were. My teacher, John Barton, said it was also possibilities telling the actor they could move here. It could be a staging indication. To me, they're not set down in stone. And again, the only thing that William Shakespeare does all the time is break the rules. When you have a lot of possibilities, you'll come up with more choices, which will make you more interesting. As an exercise, I ask you as artists, when you see a colon, to think the word therefore. Please remember, it's always a rhythm change. The next piece of punctuation is semicolon, dot with a comma underneath. I have found that the semicolon means that the next thought is more impassioned. The next thought comes rushing, gushing in. So you should, after the colon, really pick up the pace. When I wrote the book Willpower, the person that was writing it with me, the wonderful Stephanie Gunning, said to me, I'm not writing anything unless you convince me that it's true. And I thought, how dare she? I'm John Basil. I went home and I started looking at all of my speeches. I looked at Queen Margaret, an older character, and I found she has no semicolons. So I kept searching through my monologues and then found the jailer's daughter, who's 15, and she has lots of semicolons. Then I looked at Juliet. She has lots of semicolons. I cannot say 100% that you only have a semicolon if you're young and you're thinking fast and your thoughts are crashing in one upon the other. It will happen for older characters, but I have found that for vocal variety and for building up that arc, for changing the rhythm where you go faster, is after a semicolon. It has never hurt anybody to pick up the pace. Then when you get to the next piece of punctuation, you change again. Catherine said, "Let him that moved you hither remove you hence, colon." She now is going to take a big breath. She's going to come up with a more articulate thought, a better thought, and she says to Petruchio, "I knew you at the first, you were immovable," which is extremely clever, and I believe she wins that round. The next piece of punctuation I want you to think of is parenthesis. Parenthesis is the little brackets around a word or a phrase. First of all, and I'd say 90% of the time, the parenthesis means that it's an aside. An aside has three pieces of focus. First, and most importantly, to another actor on stage. Second, to the audience. And third, and hardly ever, to yourself. In the 27 plays that I directed, I think I only let it happen twice. I'm not a believer that Shakespeare's indulgent. He includes, involves, incorporates the other actors or the audience. When you do an aside, your pitch has to lower. When we were doing Speak the Speech, Hamlet was saying, "And as I say," when he gets to that part, he would lower his speech, "And as I say," then the audience would know that it's different. The second meaning for parenthesis, I believe, was Shakespeare saying to the artist, do something drastically different here. I'm going to use Emilia as an example. Emilia, when she's talking to Desdemona, she says at one point, "And say they strike us." Desdemona, 10 minutes earlier, had just been slapped across the face by Othello. Or say they scant our former having in despite. Parenthesis. No one knows what it means, and it seems very confusing. I believe Emilia is doing something drastically different to get Desdemona's mind off of being slapped, which makes me say, when you say complicated things that no one understands, that is 99% of the time the purpose. Portia in Merchant of Venice does the same thing. She's talking to Bassanio, who she loves and wants to marry, and she says, "But it is not love." And then the parenthesis, she says the next thing is very complicated, and then it's followed by, "Lest you understand me not." So she was trying to get Bassanio's mind off of that. She just basically said, "I love you." So parenthesis is tricky in the fact that it means two things. I really believe this. The majority of the time, it will be an aside. The next one is one of my favorite pieces of punctuation, and it's called a midline ending. I believe, after writing 37 plays, if he wanted the period to come at the end of the line, he would have done it. However, with a midline ending, it's when he puts the period in the middle of the line. And I'd like you to look at Emilia's speech and where I highlighted the midline endings. She says, "What is it that they do when they change us for others?" Question mark. It's in the middle of the line. "Is it sport?" Question mark. That line's a midline ending. "I think it is, colon, and doth affection breed it?" Question mark. "I think it doth, period, midline ending. "Is frailty that thus errs?" Question mark. "It is so too, period. And have we not affections?" Question mark. "Desires for sport?" Question mark. "And frailty, comma, as men have?" Question mark. Most people read the midline ending as if it was a comma. Remember, comma is a quick breath, and you lift the line into the next thought. So they would say, "What is it that they do when they change us for others? Is it sport?" Question mark. The midline ending should be crashing in like a tidal wave. What is it what they do when they change this for others? Is it sport? I think it is. And doth affection breed it? I think it doth. So she comes in fast, and you see it's a character development. It is something specific and unique to Amelia. Amelia is not allowed to talk when she's with Iago. She's with Desdemona, and she's expressing herself. And her thoughts are coming in and crashing one upon the other. That was why Shakespeare gave her midline endings. You're thinking so fast that you're interrupting yourself. Or if you're Juliet and you're in the garden, the balcony scene, and Romeo's trying to get a word in edgewise, you have all midline endings because you're not letting him speak. So every time he's going, what, but, duh, she cuts him off with her midline ending. So midline ending means the period, exclamation mark, question mark will come in the middle of the line, and the next thought comes rushing, gushing in. And it's either because you're thinking so fast and interrupting yourself, or you're interrupting someone else. Please, again, look at the handout for this and also try these out with your own text. The next one is one of the trickiest. And I have what I call the John Basil cheat sheet, which you're going to get at the very end, and it will look something like this. And we talk about end words. In the folio, in verse only, when there is no punctuation at the end of the line, it is known as an end word. And it means two things. It means that your character does not know what they're going to say next, or it's very difficult for what they're going to say next. And Shakespeare's asking you to elongate the word so you can think of just the right thing to say in the next line. I want to give you an example, Hermione from The Winter's Tale. It's a romance. For us, that means more of a fairy tale. There will be a happy ending. However, some really tragic things happen. She says, since what I am to say must be but that, no punctuation, which contradicts my accusation, comma, and no punctuation. The testimony on my part, comma, no other, no punctuation, but what comes from myself. My belief is Hermione would go something like, since what I am to say must be but that which contradicts my accusation, and the testimony on my part, no other but what comes from myself. She's working it out. Please do not use me as an example. I'm trying to make a point, is that Hermione's been under an extremely stressful situation. She's working to find the right words to say and to accomplish her action. Let's move to comedy. Twelfth Night, Sebastian comes on the scene and he sees Olivia. They hit it off right off the bat. All we know, without Shakespeare saying anything, is that they go into the house. She was wearing black. She was in mourning for her brother. When they come out of the house, he has this speech that is very funny, and he's kind of talking about what just happened. Use your imagination. And she comes out in a white dress. And they just happen to meet a priest. And her line is, Father, I charge ye by thy reverence hence to unfold, though lately we intended to keep in darkness what occasion now reveals before the ripe. What thou dost know hath newly passed between this youth and me. Period. Reverence, intended, now, no, have no punctuation at the end. Olivia cannot come out, find a priest and say, I just took this guy inside the house and knocked his socks off. She has to be very discreet in the way that she says, you better marry us, so that it all becomes okay and legal. So the purpose of an end word is Shakespeare saying to you, it's a moment I'm giving your character to elongate the word so you have time to think specifically of what words you use as tools, as thoughts in action. The final one I want to talk about is something that I personally have strong feelings about, but I do not find it written about in most texts, and it's the dash. I'd like to show you the first folio Gutenberg edition where you will see the dash. The printed edition looks like this. It's a little bit different than what you saw in the Gutenberg press. Emilia says, I nothing but to please his fantasy. 10. Enter Iago. How now? What do you here alone? 8. Emilia, do not you chide, I have a thing for you. 10. A thing for me? 6. It is a common thing. 12 dash. Emilia's next line is ha. Iago's next line is to have a foolish wife, period. So what I see the dash is Shakespeare saying that this is definitely a physical moment. It's up to your interpretation of what you do. I have seen Iagos that say, you have a thing for me, it is a common thing, and he throws her on the ground or does something very harsh. And that fills the rest of the line. So you have a thing for me. 5, it is a common thing. Finishes the line. Thrower, ha, that's one beat. To have a foolish wife. 6, she has 4 beats to be mistreated or to fill. There are very few dashes in the folio. However, even modern editions keep them and put them in. This is what a modern edition looks like. They put just a dash dash, but everyone acknowledges that it's there. Punctuation, again, is to help you build, to take quick breaths, to speed things up, to come to a dead stop, to have a better thought, so that you're building up the dramatic arc to the end stop. I'd like you to look at Juliet's gallop apace, and I'll ask you all now from this point on to highlight the last 3 words before the period, exclamation mark, question mark, to show you where the thought ends. In Juliet's gallop apace, the first one ends cloudy night immediately. Then she has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 and a half lines before she ends it with loving black-browed night. Then the last one is to the garish sun. For me, when Shakespeare gives you one line, simple emotion, do one action. As he adds lines, he's saying it is more complicated and you need to creatively debate, imaginatively argue your thoughts until you get it just right for what your action is to satisfy your need. So she has all of those lines to express that, where in the beginning she only needs 4 lines and at the end she only needs 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines. The size of your end stop is an indicator. What I'm asking you to do is highlight the last 3 words before the period, exclamation mark, question mark, and then put a verb beside that beat. You can constantly change it, but experiment. Learning is right brain and it's experimentation. That's why we're using all of these steps in the technique to help you learn. Our learning process is that you will take each one of these segments, do it all the way through your text, see what you've gained. Today, I hope you gain a lot about musical scores and punctuation. I'd like to end with a quote. In The Tempest, Caliban says, "You taught me language, and my profit on't is I know how to curse. The red plague rid you, for learning me your language. Have a good day. See you next time.